IoT security and privacy. Threats and vulnerabilities in IoT. The Internet of Things, IoT, is rapidly expanding, with billions of devices connected to the Internet. This growth brings with it a number of security threats that organizations need to be aware of. Insecure default configurations. Many IoT devices come with default configurations that are insecure. These configurations may use weak passwords, fail to encrypt data, or have other vulnerabilities that can be exploited by attackers. Lack of device authentication and authorization. Many IoT devices do not have strong authentication and authorization mechanisms in place. This can make it easy for attackers to gain unauthorized access to devices and steal data or launch attacks. Insecure communication protocols. Many IoT devices use insecure communication protocols that are vulnerable to interception and eavesdropping. This can allow attackers to steal sensitive data or even take control of devices. Insecure software updates. Many IoT devices do not have a secure process for updating software. This can allow attackers to install malicious firmware on devices and gain control of them. Supply chain attacks. Attackers can target IoT device manufacturers and compromise the supply chain. This can allow them to install malicious firmware on devices before they are shipped to customers. Insecure network services. Many IoT devices have unnecessary network services enabled, which can expose them to attacks. Attackers can exploit these vulnerabilities to gain access to devices or launch attacks on other devices on the same network. Insecure software design. Many IoT devices are rushed to market with software that has not been rigorously tested, leading to vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities can be exploited by attackers to gain access to devices, steal data, or launch attacks. Lack of input validation. Many IoT devices do not properly validate user input, which can allow attackers to inject malicious code or data into devices. This code or data can then be used to gain access to devices, steal data, or launch attacks. Insecure boot process. Many IoT devices have insecure boot processes, which can allow attackers to install malicious firmware on devices. This firmware can then be used to gain control of devices, steal data, or launch attacks. Lack of device management. Many IoT devices are not properly managed, which can make it difficult to identify and patch vulnerabilities. This can also make it difficult to track and control devices, which can increase the risk of attacks. IoT botnets. IoT devices can be infected with malware and used to launch distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks. These attacks can overwhelm a target's network and make it unavailable. Physical attacks. IoT devices can be physically attacked to steal data or damage them. This is especially a concern for critical infrastructure devices. Privacy concerns. IoT devices collect a lot of data about their users and their surroundings. This data can be used to track users, create profiles of them, and target them with advertising. Regulation compliance. Organizations that use IoT devices need to comply with a variety of regulations, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. This can be complex and time-consuming. Lack of security awareness. Many organizations lack awareness of the security risks associated with IoT devices. This can lead to poor security practices and increased risk of attacks. Security measures for IoT devices and systems. Securing IoT devices and systems is crucial as the Internet of Things, IoT, landscape continues to expand, encompassing a vast array of interconnected devices. To safeguard these devices and the data they collect, organizations must implement comprehensive security measures. Strong authentication and authorization. Enforce strong passwords and multi-factor authentication mechanisms to prevent unauthorized access. Establish granular access control policies to restrict device usage and data access based on user roles and privileges. Secure communication channels. Employ encryption protocols like TLS/SSL to protect data transmitted between IoT devices and cloud platforms. Implement network segmentation to isolate IoT devices from critical business networks, minimizing the attack surface. Regular software updates. Regularly update device firmware and software patches to address newly discovered vulnerabilities. Utilize automated update mechanisms to streamline the patching process and ensure prompt vulnerability remediation. Secure device management. Implement a centralized device management platform to monitor, configure, and update IoT devices remotely. Enforce device registration and authentication to track devices within the network and identify unauthorized additions. Physical security measures. Implement physical access controls to protect IoT devices from unauthorized physical tampering. Consider using tamper-evident seals or enclosures to detect unauthorized device modifications. Data security and privacy. Encrypt sensitive data stored on IoT devices and in transit. Implement data minimization practices to collect and store only the data necessary for the intended purpose. Vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. Regularly conduct vulnerability scans and penetration tests to identify and address potential security weaknesses in IoT devices and networks. Engage security experts to perform comprehensive assessments. Security awareness and training. Educate employees about IoT security risks and best practices. Provide training on identifying suspicious behavior, reporting security incidents, and following secure device usage guidelines. Supply chain security. Implement vendor risk management practices to ensure the security of IoT devices procured from third-party suppliers. Audit supplier security practices and assess the trustworthiness of their supply chains. Continuous monitoring and incident response. Establish a continuous monitoring system to detect and respond to security incidents promptly. Implement incident response plans to contain and remediate security breaches effectively. Privacy concerns and regulations in IoT. Key privacy concerns in IoT. Data collection and use. IoT devices often collect a wide range of personal data, including location, activity patterns, and even health information. This data can be used for targeted advertising, personalized services, or even surveillance. Data sharing and third-party access. IoT device manufacturers and service providers often share collected data with third-party partners, raising concerns about data misuse and the lack of transparency in data sharing practices. Limited user control and granularity. Users often have limited control over the data collected by their IoT devices, making it challenging to manage their privacy preferences and opt out of unwanted data collection. Lack of transparency and disclosure. IoT device manufacturers and service providers may not adequately disclose their data collection practices, making it difficult for users to make informed decisions about their privacy. Potential for data misuse and surveillance. The vast amount of personal data collected by IoT devices creates opportunities for data misuse, surveillance, and profiling, potentially leading to discrimination or harm. Apart from data regulations and guidelines, you can take following measures. Data minimization. Collect only the data necessary for the intended purpose and limit data retention periods. User transparency and control. Provide clear and transparent information about data collection practices and offer users granular control over their data settings. Secure data storage and transmission. Implement strong encryption and security measures to protect data from unauthorized access and breaches. Regular privacy audits and assessments. Conduct regular privacy audits to assess compliance with regulations and identify potential privacy risks. Educate users about privacy risks. Raise awareness among users about IoT privacy risks and provide guidance on protecting their privacy.